if I can just extend a huge thanks to everybody who's here, because a lot of these kinds of tracks, people don't consider them as being important, and they are, because in any organization, mentorship is really vital, because it's about not only the skill aspect of it, it's also about, you know, the person, the whole person in the organization. So I'd like to just, you know, begin by giving all of you a shout out for seeing this as a very important track. Because we are in a very interesting space right now in terms of, like, you know, the film industry, and it's important to help each other, collaborate, and work ourselves out of this state of funk that's happening globally.
A lot of what we'll end up talking about organically through our conversations is how important it is, no matter who you are and what stage of your career you're at, is you have the opportunity to keep a door open for somebody else and to reach back and continue to pull more people up with you and not let the door close. And I think that's what is so brilliant about this conversation of mentorship, and to your point, why it's so important that we're all sitting here and you all are prioritizing it today, because how else do we grow and evolve as an industry?
I'm really happy that I'm a curator of this track. We had 2 amazing talks, and now I have 2 amazing women sitting here talking about mentorship.
I'm Nosipho Maketo-van Bragt, and I'm the CEO of Chocolate Tribe and the founder of Avijosi, which is an animation visual effects in Johannesburg initiative that we started about 3 years ago with Netflix. We do both animation and visual effects, and we're about 40 of us. Big vision is really to kind of create this energetic, vibrant community in Africa for animation and the love and passion for animation. So yeah, that's who I am.
Amazing. Hi, I'm Julianne Crommett. My pronouns are she, her, ella. I'm a very proud Puerto Rican and Cuban American. Spanish is actually my first language. English is my second, for any Spanish speakers who are out there. I'm founder and CEO of Collective Moxie. We are an inclusive storytelling consultancy firm. We work across everywhere you see storytelling, so anything from animation and live action in film and television, to advertising, to brand work, and to gaming. I have also been a diversity, equity, and inclusion practitioner for 15 years in media and tech. Yes, there have been many of us around that long doing the work, and longer. And I'm also an animation producer with Jinko Goto. We have a production company called Cookies and Milk. And I also am very proud to be a college professor these days. I'm the professor of the practice at Georgia Tech in Atlanta, Georgia, where I'm based. So it's a real pleasure to be here.
Can I redo my introduction after that?
I'd like to point out she's the CEO of a company, in case you missed that, and a festival. You know, here we are.
I know we are mentor. I forgot.
And all of those things, right? Thank you. Oh, I forgot. We also have our WIA roles, too. We should probably say that. So I'm secretary of WIA on the Global Executive Committee and the Inclusion Chair on WIA. Do you want to talk about your work with WIA really quick?
Yeah. Okay, maybe let's...
We'll go to you, Imke, and then we'll come
Should I
back.
start with my WIA role?
Go, start with your real role.
Start with my WIA role. So my name is Imke Fehrmann, and I am a women animation mentor coach. I have been mentor before, but now I'm focusing on the mentor coach, especially for the EMEA region, which for me includes pretty much everything but the US, so I even have some mentors in Latin America. I'm also global head of production at Rise Visual Effects Studios, and I think that's it. Well, I'm on the program board here.
I always find it important to make a distinction between what is a mentor, what is a sponsor, and what is a coach, because they actually serve distinctly different roles in your career journey and in your life, and they're all important for different reasons. A mentor is often somebody who has walked a path either before you or different from you or similar to you, who can give you insights into your own career journey, into ways and learnings that they have had along the way, and can also be learning from you equally on your perspective and the way you're seeing your life and your career. And I consider it much more of that sort of peer-to-peer opportunity of learning, shared learning, and pathway building. When I think about a sponsor is different than a mentor. A mentor can also be a sponsor, but a sponsor's role is that they speak your name in rooms that you are not in. They speak your name in rooms that you are not in and highlight who you are, what you bring to the table, and in many ways are a champion or a cheerleader. Again, a mentor might serve that capacity, but they don't necessarily have to, right? And a sponsor may not be your mentor. It may be somebody who's encountered you in the workplace, you've worked together, who has met you through an organization like WIA, and they begin to speak your name in places where you are not, and opportunity comes from that speaking of your name. And then a coach is somebody who sits, I think, actually a really interesting position, which is, I have a coach, by the way, and one of the things I think about my coach is she is an objective third party to listen and think through ideas, thought processes, and also to point out where I have gaps or I'm not thinking about the whole picture. And she's not necessarily, in my case, somebody who's in the film industry at all. She does not necessarily have walked any similar pathway to mine in that exact way, but she is trained to give me insights, frameworks, ideas of how to think about things that illuminate new ideas and pathways for me, and in many ways allow me to leave and chew on things to discover my path. And so for me, those are the ways I've seen that distinction between mentorship, sponsorship, and coaching.
Yeah, that's, I really can only subscribe this, but I did a coach training, and what I also like is that we're thinking partners as coaches. So we don't, like a mentor may give you advice or give you experiences. As a coach, actually, it's the part of the profession that we do not give advice. We help you develop your potential. We help you to become the better you or the better version of you. And I think one thing that came up this morning, which is also really important, and we all have to be reminded as mentors, prospective mentors, mentees, that there is a big distinction between these three roles and therapy. This is really important, that we cannot give medical help. We cannot give professional help. And I've had cases in the past in my mentorship circles where I actually said or referred them to medical professionals. So it's really important also when you mentor that to keep that in mind. There is a line, and we have to be aware of this, that we cannot service this.
So I wanted to share a little bit about how I came into mentorship, actually, and maybe just speak a little bit about WIA. I came into this space as an attorney. So I'd practiced for a couple of years, and I decided it's a long story, so I won't go into it. But the long short of it is the fact that I started in this space not having gone to film school. So for me, my natural instinct wasn't really, as an artist. I am an advocate for artists, and that's sort of like, the role that I inhabit. So when I was then asked by Jinko, actually, why don't you mentor somebody? I felt inadequate. I had imposter syndrome. Who do I mentor? Because I'm not an artist. I've never, and I think inherently we're all artists, by the way. So I get it before anybody puts their hand up and says to me, all of us are born artists. I know we are, okay. But I trained myself out of being an artist, which is completely wrong. So anyway, long and short of it. And she asked me to become a mentor, and I was like, mentor who? How do I do that? I don't even know what the structure of mentoring is. And she was like, no, I'll guide you. I'll be with you all the way. Just make sure you show up. And I started mentoring for WIA during COVID, actually. I think it was 2020. And I've done about 3 or 4 cycles with WIA. The first one I had about six actually ladies in my group. And, it was very interesting because coming from South Africa or from Africa, Africa, you yourself have an imposter syndrome. Who am I going to teach, these Western women who've got all the resources and, they probably have been in the career a lot longer than I am. What can I tell them that they don't already know? And it took me a process of actually understanding that not only was I mentoring them, but they were also mentoring me into this role. And so for me, that was a wonderful gift actually that Uwe has given me in a sense of that I was mentored into being a mentor. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. For me, it's funny. I've actually not participated officially in WIA mentorship circles. It's so interesting you were mentored into being a mentor, because I think the same thing happened to me. What organic? I'll never forget the first time somebody actually asked me if I could be their mentor, very officially. This was at Google. Back in 2014, I was in the Buenos Aires office in Argentina, and I was in a conference room. I was at the time leading the diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy for Latin America for Google. And this young gentleman comes in the room, and he had scheduled time on my calendar. I had no idea who he was. He sat down, and he looked at me square, like just straight on, and said, I want to be a diversity, equity, and inclusion practitioner, and I would like you to mentor me. Just like that. As if like that was the introduction. And I thought, how bold. And there was also something about the boldness that I loved, because to that point, and to your point, I had not actually thought of myself as somebody who could mentor in that space, even though I had done the work for about 5 years at that point. I had been at NBC Universal before that, and I'd actually, when I look back, I had informally mentored many writers and many directors into their first jobs in television. I just hadn't seen it that way. And by him sitting down with the boldness of using the word mentor, it clicked for me in that sense of, oh, that's a thing. And there might be a way to learn together. It was sort of the first thought I had, because he was sitting in the Buenos Aires office, which is not where I was sitting in the company. And my immediate thought was, oh, we probably have something to teach each other. And it was in that moment that started a now, 11-year friendship and mentorship. I still talk with him frequently to this day. It's the longest mentorship relationship I've had, in which I consider myself both the mentor and the mentee. And Tommy now has also been a diversity, equity, and inclusion practitioner for 10 years. He started about a year after we started our mentorship journey, doing it in Latin America for Google, and is still with Google to this day, doing it now in EMEA out of Spain. And for me, that has been the most profound thing to watch, is how we have both made each other better as practitioners, but that it all started with a bold declaration of naming mentorship as the opportunity. And that for me has just stuck with me since.
Did you ever ask him if that took a lot of courage, or did you ever talk about this? Because I'm sure that everyone who sits here and would like to have a mentor, is this the way to go, or?
It's an unusual way. There's nobody else that's ever done that explicitly. But what I will say about it is it's the way that he said it. He said it in such a way that was, I am so excited about this idea, this discipline, this role, that I want to learn. And I could read that in the tone of his voice and the way he said it. He wasn't demanding it. He was saying it out of sheer joy and curiosity. And I always think it's the way somebody approaches you, like the spirit in which they come. And when we talked about it, we did actually talk about it later, and he said it wasn't so much that he was scared, it's that he had nobody else he thought he could ask that of. And I thought that was that also hit me and struck me, because he was looking around and he didn't see anybody else who was a practitioner in DEI that he could even ask that question of. And that also brought an awareness to me of the opportunity maybe for scaling in thinking about this question of mentorship, especially in the quote unquote DEI space. Yeah.
I think for me, what's also important from where I'm from, and I always kind of pivot on, being African, not that that's the only thing I am, but I think it's very important to share that experience, especially from a mentorship perspective. There's a great deal of suspicion around mentoring, and that's why at every given opportunity I speak about about it because it's been amazing for not only me, but I think our team at Chocolate Tribe. A lot of people feel, why should somebody else speak on your behalf? Why should somebody be, holding your career or your future in their hands? Particularly because there is that scarcity. I mean, we are on the other side of the world where we don't necessarily get, the big projects, and we don't always get the spotlight, for the work that we do. So there is that thing of an apprehension to say, why would you let somebody else be in a room, be a sponsor for you, or a mentor or a coach, because they could, I don't know, take all your secrets away, or the power, I don't know. So those are some of the things that we're also working through to create a structured mentorship program, because that allows you to actually see that it's a process, that allows you to also see that to some extent there's an openness to it, even though it's structured. So for us, it's really important, coming from a cultural perspective, to open up the mentorship conversation and make sure that people understand that it's there to assist them and yield real results in terms of your career going up. So yeah.
And I think it's also really important what Tommy said to you. He chose you, and I think it's something that, for example, in the We Are Mentorship program, you apply to a mentorship circle. You choose your mentor, and it's a mutual choice. So I think now Tommy only had one person to ask to, but now we have the opportunity that people can choose, can look at the mentors. And what I'm personally hoping is that we find mentors in our culture, in our space. So, for example, I was really happy that we started the mentoring or looking for mentors also in this region, in Africa, in Asia, and Middle East, because I think it's really important that mentors are there in your space or give you a different perspective. So, but still keeping in mind it's a choice. So you choose your mentor. In the end, the mentors choose you by the way you speak, or in the case of the mentorship program, you do an application. So I read through it and I see a spark, or I see something, and then I go, okay, this person, it clicks with me, or I see something. But I think it's a real luxury that we have today, that we can have a wider space and not one person, although he was lucky.
Oh, well, thank you. And also, by the way, he's now mentored many people. This is the other part that I think I want to highlight about that too, is the network effect, right, that can happen out of one person having a mentorship relationship. Suddenly they themselves, who were in the sort of quote unquote mentee spot, often then become a mentor to somebody else, or a mentee to somebody else, and on and on and on we go. And that's what I think with the We Are Mentorship program, to me, is so magical in a way, because it's a group mentorship idea. So for those who are not familiar with the program as such, as Imke described, you have the application process and there's a matching process, but it's not a one-on-one mentorship process. It's a group mentorship process, as you were talking about, Nosi. And there's something really powerful about learning in mentorship in a group, because it doesn't become, interestingly, the dynamic between one person to another person, and maybe one person who's a little bit farther along in their career and somebody who's earlier, but it becomes a dialogue, a mentorship dialogue amongst a whole group. And there's something I think really powerful about that from a learning perspective, in terms of learning and making bonds with each other. But I think the other thing that strikes me about that is also the network effect that happens out of the circles themselves, because we've heard of circles that have developed whole relationships out of their We Are Mentorship experience into doing projects together, into sponsoring each other for work, for jobs, for creation. That's, I think, the beauty of this idea of a more networked mentorship, a notion, than trying to seek somebody out like Tommy did one-on-one, which I think can seem a little more intimidating often, that you would walk into a room and be so bold, or that you would even know what room to walk into or who to ask. And this idea that you could be in a room of 7 and have a real discussion and a real camaraderie, I think is a powerful idea around what mentorship can and could be, and continues to be out of the WIA program. Absolutely. Yeah.
And I think people have to see it as a symbiotic relationship, and I repeat that it's not necessarily just you mentoring, it's, you being a mentee to the other person as well. Just to share a very brief story where my mentee got me, I had an amazing, mentorship circle called Be the Change. I've completely forgotten it. Being a change maker. Being a change maker. There you go. Be a change maker. And so I had 6 mentees in that group. One of them was actually working for Disney and very shy and highly skilled from what I could see. And she wanted to start an animation studio in India. And every time she introduced herself, she would talk about how she lived in America and all of that, but she wanted to start a studio in India. And one of the things that we kept speaking about was that be proud also of where you come from, because that's also where your superpower is from. So shortly after that, I received an email inviting me to India to speak at the Animation Guild India. And it was through her that I was able to go to India and also speak about, collaboration. And she then was invited by us to come to South Africa to speak on her work at Disney. So just to share what mentorship has done, not only for me in terms of being a mentor, but I guess in a way a mentee to her, sharing her skill and her expertise. So I thought that might be a good story for you.
Absolutely. Oh, I have one of those as well. You reminded me. This is the things that happen over time. A wonderful woman named Ariel Diaz, who was an employee at Google in the sales department when I was there many years ago. She cold emailed me. Again, people with the cold outreach. It's amazing. She sent me an email internally, and she said, I'm an aspiring television writer. And she did the smart thing, by the way, which is that she wrote an incredibly thoughtful email where she explained that she'd been working on her craft, that she had been taking writing lessons from this particular teacher. These are all important things because oftentimes you all know when you receive emails that seem very random, you can often discard them unless somebody has written something incredibly thoughtful to convey to you. And she sort of wrote me all of these pieces of the puzzle of what you've been doing to become a writer. And she goes, I noticed you used to run the writing program at NBC, and I'd love to grab a coffee with you and just learn more about that program. And I said, oh, I'd be happy to do that. And when we started talking and I explained the work I was doing at Google around changing the image of computer science on screen to see more women, gender non-binary folks, people of color, of all different gender backgrounds in stories around computer science, she said many weeks and months later, as we continued our friendship and mentorship, and I was reviewing script sheet and I gave notes to her and all that, out of nowhere she says, I'd like to put your name in for an award for Ad Color, which is an organization for people of color in the advertising business. I had no idea what Ad Color was. I didn't know this was an award, nothing. And she put in a nomination for me. I ended up becoming the Ad Color recipient for innovation that year. And it was because of her. And I became the mentee in that moment where she mentored, and not only mentored, she sponsored me in a room I had no idea existed for a recognition I had no idea existed. And to this day, it's still one of those things that it struck me, and it all happened within about 6 months. And that is to say, I think to your point around the exchange, there's an incredible dynamic that can form between that mentorship exchange that really is an exchange. And you don't even realize it when you start on the journey. You think, oh, I'm going to give some notes. And suddenly it grows into the most beautiful dialogue you could ever have. By the way, she's a staff television writer these days, working all the time. And it's been an incredible thing to watch. But I think this just speaks to that reciprocal nature. You never know. And it's a really thing of beauty. Yeah.
And I think we spoke about it this morning because it is like also a good reason for networking. And we talked about networking today. And I think this is a very good example because if I go somewhere and I contact someone because I need a job is one thing, but that's not networking. I think we spoke this morning that networking really is unconditional connections. And
say that again, because so good. Say that again. What is networking?
Unconditional connections. Unconditional connections, unconditional. So it's really like, also, I think it's a quality in people that like they connect with people, and it's not about what do I get out of it. It's not about can this person do something for me. It's like the curiosity of the other human being. It's the connection between humans, and I think what you also experienced is like you didn't have anything in mind. You just sat down with this person with curiosity and empathy. And I think this is what, take all mentorship and programs away, this is something that brings us further, that makes us grow and makes our network tighter. And I've always feel like I have this spider web of people, like you see here, that is it's just there, and it makes me a better person. And I think that's an important part of networking and mentorship.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I agree.
Co-sign. I think the other thing that strikes me as you were talking about the networking, that's very practical. It's actually something I work through with my coach, actually. As you go along in your career journey, and even if you're early in your career, you're already going to start seeing this because there are still students and others who are coming after you, right? Is that you'll start to get requests for time to sit and do informationals or to connect or maybe to start the establishment of a mentorship relationship in some way. Whether that's you reaching out to other people because you're seeking mentorship or people reaching out to you for mentorship, either way. And one of the things practically that can happen is we're all busy. So how do you practically think about your time so that you can be an effective mentor and mentee in either of those circumstances? So in a few tips or tricks that I've worked on with my coach to do this really practically is to dedicate an hour or two every month that is just for meetings or interactions that are of a mentorship capacity, so that it's not just scattered at some random point in a very busy day that you have, because we all know that to show up fully for somebody else in either capacity is very hard when you're having a stressful day. It is. And so to think about how time can work in your favor. So for myself, I have something called office hours twice a month that I do on Fridays, where I block 1 hour, and it is simply for mentorship conversations. And in this case, I do it as group mentorship. So if somebody wants to do an informational about whatever topic, we invite them to office hours and have no more than 4 people in office hours for that hour. And everybody can ask their questions, but also learn from each other. And in my last session, I had 2 people who joined who had never met each other and quite frankly had never met me. We started the conversation, and they are now working on a project together out of that conversation and out of us having the office hours. So like co-mentorship happened in like real time. But at the same token, it was time I had prepared for myself to be able to show up in the way that I wanted for that kind of conversation. This is I give out as really practical advice, because I think a lot of us think, how can I show up? How can I be real when I'm so busy? And so it could be a version of office hours. It could be that you set aside only 2 or 3 hours a month where you do that mentorship time, whether it's structured with a mentor or mentee that you work with, or it's that informational time. But just to treat it with the respect and honor that it deserves, and just treat yourself with respect and honor and how you're going to show up for it. Because I think this is a reality of our day-to-day. So I just wanted to say that explicitly in case it's helpful for folks as you're thinking about, how do I do this and how do I do it practically in a way that makes sense?
So something that I've been hugely fascinated about, obviously being also a business owner, is the mentorship between businesses. I think it's incredibly interesting, especially now, because as I mentioned before, we are all in a state of funk, and we need to. The only way that we can get out of it is to collaborate. And I suspect mentorship is part and parcel of that collaboration. If, as businesses, we're able to mentor each other, what I've found is that, and I preface it back to my previous life, for all my sins, being an attorney, is the fact that, artists are very, I'll use the word shy when it comes to the business of animation, VFX, and this beautiful business that we're in. And they often do not want to deal with anything that's related to it. In fact, I think when you mention the word business to a creative, it's like you're swearing at them, or you're really just, making them dirty. But it's a very important thing, because this is how businesses survive. It is having the acumen to run this kind of business. And if you're unable to do that, we know what happens. So I think for me, an interesting thing is really, maybe the next step, which is the mentoring of other businesses, so that we can create that healthy collective community within the creative space. So
really, actually, a wonderful notion of maybe even formalizing that at some level. It's a good note to take back to WIA as well. Because this organizational mentoring is a really interesting concept. I think a lot about. So you run your own business, I run my own business, and you've been an entrepreneur at different points. I think that there's an interesting thing of when you're building something, it can be a very lonely endeavor. We don't talk about that enough, by the way, out loud, which is that often when you're an entrepreneur, and I think actually every artist is an entrepreneur in your own way, we also don't talk about it like that, where you're often freelancing, right? You're often trying to build your own business. There's a lot of skills and tools that come along with that. There's a lot of social things that come along with that. And part of that can also be isolation. Speaking to your co-mentorship between businesses, something I started doing locally in Atlanta is entrepreneurship walks. I have found this to be really interesting. Instead of being on a Zoom, because we're on Zoom and in meetings all day, all of us in different ways, right? Is that the first Wednesday of every month, I go on an entrepreneurship walk with another woman who's an entrepreneur in Atlanta. We have it on our calendars. We set aside an hour to walk and then a half hour to go get coffee afterward. And we invite other entrepreneurs to our walk, which is how we actually meet each other. And we also discuss the challenges we're having, the decisions we're facing, the market being weird. And it is a way, first of all, to feel less lonely immediately. But secondly, to your point around co-mentorship, we really learn from each other. We're not running the same businesses. In fact, I run a creatively minded business. She is in a gifting business, so like corporate gift boxes that you receive. By the way, June Dragon Butterfly, in case anybody is interested, June Dragonfly. I promote, by the way, her business on every panel I'm on. That's sponsorship.
That's sponsorship.
And by the way, she's gotten accounts out of that. This is how it works, everybody, real time. And Drea is her name. And so she's running a sort of gifting business, working with small businesses all the time. We had somebody else join us recently who's building a different kind of business. And I have to tell you, just to your point, Nosi, it has been remarkable what has been unlocked from those walks. And sometimes it's even the physical act of just getting outside and sharing that creates a different dynamic. But yeah, I just echo, I have found this to be profoundly helpful. So there was a way to formalize it. I think we would have a lot of people, not only in this room, but other entrepreneurs who would be, I think, certainly signing up for something like this. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and just the idea of it, just the idea of walks, and like when you think about like, would like to have a mentor, I would like to be a mentee, but take the essence of it and organize something around yourself if you don't want to go for like a more formal mentorship. And to Nosi's point at the beginning, like, can I do this? Can I really mentor? Like, is this really, what do people want from me? Like, can I do something for them? Yes, the answer is yes. you can, at any point of your career, you can be a mentor and a mentee. Like, I'm still looking through the mentorship circles, and I think like I will sign up as a mentee, because you can be both. You can even be, we have one that is both. She's a mentee and a mentor in the same circle round. And I think it's really important. Like, I had a mentee who was a production assistant, and she took networking to 11, I have to say. And so we talked about it, and then I said, why don't you do the next circle meeting? And she talked about her networking techniques and how she communicates and how she follows up with people. And she was production assistant, I think, at Nickelodeon, and it was amazing. I still quote her to this day. I invited her to another circle because she was just so brilliant. And so the short of this is, no matter where you are in your career, in your life, you can be a mentor and you can be a mentee.
And I think there's also a real sense of, I don't know, I'm going to again speak from sort of personal experience, in the sense that there is, this kind of going thought process that the only way you get up the ladder is by pushing everybody else down. Certainly with the sort of like A-type personalities that I had to deal with in my previous life, that is sort of like how we were all, conscientized that that's what you do, and even if you do it subtly or exactly, that's it. And I think the conversation today is really about the fact that innately artists are, collaborative, and they're social beings. And it's important that mentorship becomes part of that structure to make sure that we keep pushing the message of let's collaborate, let's mentor each other, let's build each other, not only in terms of like just resources, but mental health and, all the things that we need to be able to do this amazing work. So yeah, let's sort of shirk out that instinct of let me get to the top by pushing somebody else. And I think your example was so apt. I'm so afraid to even quote it right now because I might botch it, about opening the door and making sure others are going in. And for me, I think that is really just quite an emblematic and a very key sort of like, way of seeing mentorship and making sure that the door is wide open for others. And the thing that I often say to people that even in my position, if I don't get there, as long as I've opened the door for others to get there, that's very important.
I can't second that enough. And I think, just to bring it full circle, the first time I actually ever heard that metaphor about the door was at Ad Color, bringing it back full circle to the mentorship story I told you. And it was Tiffany Warren, who's the CEO and founder of Ad Color, and that's actually their tagline. And it's something that, it's move forward, reach back. And there's something that has just always stuck with me also about that metaphor, because it's so true. And to your point, it doesn't even have to be you who gets there. I love that. But that you've made it so somebody else can. The best day in my career, I'll tell you right now, is the day that I get to report to somebody who I have mentored or sponsored. Because that means that they went even farther. And that's how we should be thinking about it. Not that, how did they get that top job and I didn't? Like, it's how amazing that they got into that next position, and how lucky am I to know them and be a part of their circle and to be in collaboration with them, because that's really what it's all about. I will name her because I like saying names of people who are not in a room. Maya McCullough, who is at Walmart, to me is already acting like an incredible CEO. She carries herself that way. I've said this to her very explicitly, so have other people. She's in her 20s right now, and I have told her very distinctly, please hire me when you are running the company that you are going to inevitably run, or organization you're going to inevitably run, because I would like nothing more than to collaborate with you. It would be an honor. And I think that's how, to your point, Nosi, of it may not even be you, but it's the person that you keep working with and they pull through. That's how we should be thinking about this. It's an abundance mentality instead of a scarcity mentality. There is room. And in fact, if we make more room will appear. We don't think about it that way, but that's actually what happens, because that will create more opportunity, more business that in turn creates more opportunity. And that's the collaboration piece that you've been speaking to. And that really strikes me as something that, to your point around that competition piece, we have to undo, is take us away from that scarcity mentality of like, especially, by the way, I'd just like to point out for anybody who's underrepresented or undertapped within your particular society, whether that be around gender, race, disability, any other area of identity, there's often this mentality that there's only one seat for each of us. That is untrue. There are not only multiple seats, we have whole new tables to build. And that is the opportunity. It's not about fighting for that one seat. It's in fact saying, how can we expand the table? How can we build a new table? How can we bring more chairs? Or maybe not chairs at all. Maybe it's space that people need, right? And that for me is the win in all of this, if we do this right, is that we break that down entirely. That's the holding of the door, really, yeah.
That's really beautiful. Before we get to questions, I wanted to touch on one point, which I think, Julian, you started bringing up this morning, is the generational.
Yes. Oh, that was a really good point.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So we should just name that this is the first time in all of human history, as we understand it, that there are 5 generations working in the workplace at the same time. That has actually never happened before. We're not talking about it explicitly. I cannot tell you how much, as a practitioner, so many people come to me with, we're having intergenerational communication issues, meaning people are speaking different languages, quite literally using different vocabulary, speaking past each other, right? That is an opportunity, everybody. When somebody says that is an opportunity. That is an opportunity for cross-generational mentorship. Say it with me, cross-generational mentorship.
At the same time.
Exactly. And it is really, we have a gift, actually, we've been given, that we have 5 generations alive and working together at the same time. That is a gift. That is not a problem. We're only making it a problem because we're not embracing it as a gift, which is to say, those who are new into their career in the workplace in Gen Z or younger are bringing their perspective, their learnings, a lot to teach and a lot to learn. Those who are at the latter part of their career, right, who are baby boomers, or even maybe in the generation beyond that, are able to bring perspective and learnings and career journey, and also learn what's new, what's changing, what's industry, and everything in between. And that is the gift we have been given. And somebody said it at South by Southwest really well, which is that we have an opportunity to have a, how do they put it, a currency of wisdom. We have wisdom to gain from each other. And instead of a knowledge currency, it's actually a wisdom currency that we should be tapping into. And that's the gift we have with intergenerations. And I think for me, that in the term of the conversation of mentorship could be incredibly unlocking. And I have to tell you, at least personally, I have fully benefited from having mentors and mentees who are from different generations than my own. And actually some of the strongest ones I have are in that case. And so I highly recommend, if you leave here today, to please think about how you could be tapping into that generational opportunity we have, because trust me, what we will unlock is so much better than what we have today. And say it with me, intergenerational mentorship.
Love that. I just thought of all my kind of like irks with Gen Zs here. Okay, I can't say that, can I? But I've said it quietly.
Alpha comes next. We just keep adding.
Yes. No, but I think that's a really wonderful point that you're making, Julianne, because suddenly the one thing that I've sort of noticed is taking on the CEO role, you're now also dealing with additional issues within the workplace, and you're being asked to answer questions which you would ordinarily not have. I think the previous, obviously, structures which we were all sort of like brought up into is that there's very minimal connection between the generations. There's a hierarchy, there's a bar across the board, and what you're proposing is really amazing in terms of like, let's break it down and make sure that we're able to reach into the future, having the wisdom of the past. I love that.
Yeah, I mean, that's also in the mentorship circles. Obviously, I'm not at the start of my career. I had people in their early 20s. And as a mentor, I felt mentored by them because I learned perspective. I learned the view of different cultures, different generations. And so for me, the mentorship from a mentor point of view is also refreshing, learning, and I think that's one thing that we shouldn't also forget, that we always have to look at perspective and be on the same eye level and learn from each other.
Exactly right. By the way, every generation has something to learn, and every generation has something to teach. It's both. And by the way, every generation is imperfect. And so I think if we come from that place, there's no telling what we could unlock. Yeah.
Yeah. Does anyone has any questions for any of us here? I can come down with a.
Oh, look at the hand shoot up. We love it.
Oh. I think we go here first.
Thank you so much. You should do a podcast or something.
Well, starting in September,
Love it.
Collective Moxie will be launching a podcast called You've Got Moxie. And perhaps we will just revive this conversation as an episode on You Got Moxie. Woo! All right.
Actually, I'm Generation Z, like one of the first. And I actually got 2 mentors at the moment. One in the VFX industry and the other one in a more, let's say, startup entrepreneur scene. And I kind of noticed that there is this different approach when you want to get a mentor. Because for me, I always had this goal. I have a plan. I just need feedback and tips. But I also noticed that a lot of people my age, they actually just need ideas because they don't have a goal they're working towards too. What would you say to people who just say, like, I'm kind of helpless at the moment, I need some input, some first steps?
We're just thinking.
Yeah. Loading. It's
Loading, it's dial-up for anybody when the internet used to go. Yeah.
I feel like you should ask the question again, but at the same time, if somebody is saying that they need ideas, were you going to answer it? No. Okay. All right.
Oh, good.
Look, I think for me, the most important thing is obviously to indicate what it is. What's your goal? What is it that you want to achieve? You know, that's the first thing as a mentor-mentee sort of situation. What are your goals? Where do you want to go? Where do you see yourself? And if you want to get concrete ideas, obviously they will emanate from the goals that you'd have shared with your mentor. I do think that if you are sort of like, running out of ideas of what you need to do in terms of your career, maybe it's time to change your career and do something else. I don't know.
Yeah, it could also be, a different way of framing it, right? Which is, instead of, if you're not sure what exactly it is you want to do, another way to ask it is, what do you want to learn? An exercise that I've actually done, by the way, with people who are even much farther along in their career, is I've asked, what companies and what people's careers and trajectories do you admire? Who has done something that you think is particularly interesting, or an organization that you think is doing something particularly interesting? And that can actually be a place to start, which is that you may not be able to name exactly where you are necessarily in that trajectory, but you're recognizing that there's something about what that person has done or what that organization has done that speaks to you. And that might be even a place to start, where you could even go on LinkedIn, for example. And if you feel so bold, you can cold message somebody, which, by the way, I have a mentee who did that to me on LinkedIn and wrote a very thoughtful email. I have now been also a coach to her in a business deal too. But that, that's one way of doing it. Or going on LinkedIn and seeing who works in that organization, who maybe has a title or career path that seems interesting to you, or in many cases is connected maybe to some other person that you know, and you can ask them and say, hey, would you mind asking this person if they would be open to spending 15 minutes? And so that can be a way to identify, even if you're not 100% sure how it works or how it might come together, a person or a place where you might be able to start and get some insight. Is that helpful? Perfect. Yeah.
And I totally can co-sign the thoughtful emails, because I think that both of my best experiences, like creating a climate change exhibition in Nepal or producing a short film in Pakistan, both were based on cold calls, emails. I didn't know the person at all. I just wrote them a letter, and not everyone answers. Obama didn't, by the way. But but normally people answer. And I think, speaking of Obama, what I liked about Michelle Obama's book was that she said she met with people and asked them about their job. And I thought that was so cool. She just went and talked to people about their job. Some were interviews and some were just... she met with them for lunch and asked questions about the job, asked questions what they do, asked questions what they like about it, and to decide where she would go next. So I really liked that. So I think that would be a good test too.
But can I just say something about also the power of I don't know? You know, I think that's an incredible thing to be able to say, I don't know, and also to allow for a space for you to get to a place where you ventilate that. You know, and the importance of that is once you get to know once you get to be at the place that you want to be, it's a lot more powerful because you would have gone through the process of I don't know, and I want to learn. And so getting a mentor or somebody who can guide you through that, space is really important. So for me, I don't think people give enough space to, and I don't know, and I'm figuring it out and I'm going through the process. So really important for me.
And to also say it out loud. I think that we allow ourselves in this society where everyone knows what they're doing, they have a goal and they have a career, to say, I don't know where I'm going right now. There's a book, it's called The Crossroads Between Should and Must, and there's an exercise where you look at what do I do if I don't have to do anything? So where does my brain go automatically, or what do I do? Do I like make spreadsheets to organize something, or do I go paint or something? So let your spirit wander a little bit. And I like that, to say, I don't know. But we had another question.
We have many questions, 2 more over here.
Thank you for the incredible positive energy you're transmitting. And do you believe man can learn this?
The quick answer is no. No, I'm joking.
What an inclusive talk.
Oh,
Anyway.
That's depressing.
No, I'm just joking. I mean, I think one of the wonderful things about WEA for me was that you also have men. So a lot of so I've got several stories that I want to share, but I'll share one. There was a program that was being done in South Africa where they were asking about 30 women to join an incubation. And there was a lot of backlash from men saying, especially men of color, who were saying, we've only just come into this space as well. We also didn't get opportunities. Now there's this incubation that's only for women. You know, why are we not included in this? And for me, while it was a conversation again of scarcity, the question that you ask for me is really important, because in a way, we has answered that in saying that you can be an ally. You can be an ally to other women. You can be an ally to other people who don't know what they're doing, and you can share your expertise through that. So definitely, I think men can, be part of this conversation, even when it's gender specific or when it comes to mentoring. And we certainly need men in these conversations, because a lot of the times, men are the ones who are in positions of power. So definitely.
Nothing changes without you, so please, men. And I like to use the word accomplice not ally, because accomplice means you're in it with us in totality. Allyship is sort of like you show up, you support, right? But accomplice means you've rolled up your sleeves and you're in it. And I think that's the real, I think we need to frame conversations around the change work that hopefully we're all here in this room because you're committed to, of making a society that is fairer and more just and more equitable and more inclusive. Those are beautiful things, by the way. I don't know why they've been made into negative things, but those are beautiful things. And they're incredibly powerful for us as a society. The only way we do that is actually with everybody. And the framing we have to have is, it's not you versus me or us versus them. It's all of us versus a system that is not actually designed for all of us. And that's the framing that we have to change in order to, I think, actually see the long-term systemic change that we want.
In an ideal scenario, both the mentee and the mentor are in it, and they're really wanting to be part of this relationship. But I think realistically, there's always one side that's busier than the other, and sometimes it's not always the mentor, sometimes it's the mentee. What is the responsibility to go after someone and maintain that relationship? If there's a lot of potential, you don't necessarily want to let that go. But what do you guys say to that?
I think I actually had a mentee who was incredibly busy. I think you need to be nuanced and you need to assess the situation. But anything that requires change needs time. So that mentee needs to also give up some time to you to be able to do your mentoring. So I do think, as I said, it's a symbiotic relationship. It cannot occur with the other party being absent. So it can be organic. It can also be structured, as mentioned before, where you do set out time. But there's no way that you can mentor somebody without them giving you, time. So I don't know if I've...
Within the We Are mentorship, we do have commitments that we sign. So as a mentor, we sign a commitment of what we give and what time we give, and the mentee does that too. And I think that even if you're in a mentor-mentee relationship outside, it's good to manage expectations. And if you're a mentee or a mentor, whether you're through WIA or on your own, you have to sit down and say, these are my expectations, or this is what I can give, and then the other person has to do that. So you're matching, and maybe it's just a conversation, but this conversation is important to have because it's otherwise there can be misunderstandings or there can be some conflict out of it, and life gets in the way. Productions get in the way, career gets in the way. So, and then I think it's about trust and communication. But first of all, I would say the outset is an agreement.
And I would say use time to your advantage. So as I mentioned earlier, if it's not working from a dynamic and time perspective, no matter which side of the coin, no matter who. Sometimes it's about that regroup and then approaching it, to your point, Nosi, with nuance, but then very practically, how can you use the calendar? How can you use timing actually to your advantage from an accountability standpoint, a shared accountability standpoint? So it may be, right, that the time of day isn't necessarily working. Maybe it's that it needs to be at a different part of the month. But at least to create that mechanism for communication, I think is really important to echo both of you. But that just very practically, how can you use that calendaring as a point of shared accountability? And maybe revisit even structure, format, et cetera, and have just a very honest conversation about that, if that's helpful too.
Any advice for when you find yourself lacking the motivation, drive, or energy that made you start your journey in the first place, but not because you're not feeling the journey anymore, that you don't like the journey anymore? It's more like when you started this journey, you were a child, and now you're an adult. As a child, you thought, hey, maybe I don't know that, but that's what being a child is all about learning. Everything is about learning. Everything I don't know right now can still be learned. Now, as an adult, it just feels like, why don't I already know this?
Any mentor in the audience want to take that before we respond? That was resounding silence. I think it's a flip to... here's the fun part is we don't really know anything through our whole of our life. You know, even as we get into adulthood, you know, it's that great blessing of the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know. And sometimes instead of letting the society tell us that we have to have all the answers, I love that you said earlier, I'm going to bring it back to you, Nosipho, that you say, I don't know. And that there is power in not only naming it, but then saying, I'm going to have curiosity to learn that piece. You know, we have probably 9 lives within our life, if we're lucky, right? It keeps evolving, it keeps changing. Things happen sometimes that are out of our control. Dynamics change, family changes, et cetera. And the opportunity, I always think, is to think about, what is it that I want to learn? What is it that I don't know? And let me go and seek people who might illuminate even questions I don't even realize I should be asking. And sometimes it even comes to that, if you've hit that point of you feel like, I'm frustrated that I don't know all these things, maybe it's a moment to step back and say, what are the questions I don't even realize I don't know? And then who can help me illuminate those questions? And then from those questions, we'll start to form new answers, new ideas, maybe even a whole new area of exploration within your career. And those moments of transition, by the way, are often a gift, even though they seem the most stressful in your career, because it can seem the most squishy, if you will. But they often are the moments when you look back that are the greatest gifts, actually, in your life and your career. And so I encourage you, in whatever mentorship capacity you're in or on your journey, to think about those moments of when you hit that wall actually as maybe the greatest opportunity that's been given to you to ask different questions. And I think that's for me where I went from your question, and also from the opportunity within mentorship, which is to say there's an opportunity there around the questions themselves.
Just to piggyback on that, I think there's a synergy between your alignment with knowledge, you know, and that synergy happens when you are in sync with what you love doing and what you want to be. And if you feel like you don't already know this, it may, again, I mean, to my previous joke when I said maybe try something else, is the fact that sometimes you're not in sync with something because it's not necessarily your path. You know, we get a lot of people coming to our studio applying to be concept artists, and you're looking at this and you're like, this is a stick man that you drew, you know, this is not your path, but they've got the passion, you know, they've got the passion, they think they can do it. So I think there is an alignment between you and the things that you know, and lean into that, you know, it's very visceral, and follow that path, and, you know, don't also put pressure on yourself because society says by a certain time you should know this, you know, and I think that also creates a lot of anxiety because not all of us are gifted in one area, and that's okay. That's part of it. So yeah.
I affectionately call it the University of Doofus, and we are all attending that through our whole life. And sometimes you will pay a tuition to the University of Doofus, both literally in terms of doofus, for those who don't know the word, is like dummy, you know what I mean, is silly pants. And that sometimes you'll pay a tuition, quite literally, maybe sometimes you'll have to pay a fee. But it is in those moments of the University of Doofus, quite frankly, that you often learn the most. And I think you're absolutely right. That's where the alignment might find itself. And it's worth the price of tuition, let me put it that way. And if you're being hard on yourself, just call it the University of Doofus. I just paid tuition at the University of Doofus. It's all good.
As another mentor, I guess, school fees, we call it in South Africa as well. You know, you pay school fees when you mess up. And I think that's actually also important to know. You don't have to be perfect, you know? It's okay to fail. If anything, most business leaders will tell you it's through failure that you learn. So don't be afraid to fail. Don't be afraid to ask questions. And you guys said it already beautifully. I don't feel I have to repeat all that. That was spot on. But that's what it is. You know, your path reveals itself as you walk, right? You don't know where you're going. In one point, I always thought I was going to be an animator, and I studied animation. That was my target. But as you walk, you realize that's actually not my career. When I started applying for certain jobs, the form was animator, modeler, texture artist, VFX artist. What do you want to be? And I was like, I love all of it. How do I can only click on one thing. And you realize that the question is actually not what you want to be, but what is it that you want to be that this form doesn't offer? A creative director, a supervisor, a creative producer, what is it? And sometimes you're just walking on a path that is maybe not your path. And it will reveal itself because experience sometimes only can give you those opportunities. For example, being a VFX producer is not something you just walk into. The amount of experience, the amount of understanding, I mean, and Andrea Knoll just in the talk before that, I'm not sure if you attended, just the wealth of experience that you need and the insight you need to find your path means that you have to walk for a while before you can find it. So don't be impatient, don't expect to have all the answers straight away. Some things come with time, and yeah, just trust that you're on a path that gives you joy. Silly thing, when I put on clothes in the shop and I'm like, okay, do I like this? When I start dancing in front of the mirror, that means I like what I'm wearing. and that's when I buy it.
But I also think, just to
we
add
have to.
quickly, I think there is also a huge opportunity for new spaces. Instead of looking to what everybody else, and yourself included, says, this is the path that you should walk, there are other open spaces which we leave and we don't, investigate because we're so hell-bent on going in the direction that everybody thinks is the right direction. So there's a whole big world out there, and, look across the board rather than the one space that everybody is telling you that might not be your path. So
yeah, I love all these answers. I think I'm ignoring the people that tell me that we have to finish. Just one short note on that as well. There is a circle of transformation and learning. And the one that comes before the transformation is stillness. It feels like nothing is happening. So also embrace sometimes the moments where nothing is happening, because it's part of the transformation to a different phase, I think.
Way to take us home. Oh my God. I needed that today. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Say it with me now. Intergenerational mentorship. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank
Everyone
you.
to you. It was really nice. Thank you, Nosipho. Thank you, GM.